Hey Brett, how's it going this week?
Good, Ange. How are you?
Good. Well, that means it's another episode of Money in the Bank, the podcast where we talk about all things related to personal finance. So, Brett, trivia question, per usual.
Oh, you're not even going to lead in with any witty banter?
Do you have any witty banter for me?
No.
All right, then I think we should go to the trivia question.
Okay, let's go.
So, how many Americans are currently in debt collection? So this is like when the collection agency is like calling your house and hounding you to pay maybe a parking ticket or a cell phone bill or credit card debt or your auto loan.
1/3 of our renters that we manage.
So you're going with 1/3?
Sure.
You are correct.
Yes, all right. This is the first answer I've gotten right in a long time.
1 in 3 Americans are in credit card debt. Now this stat blew my mind.
That is a lot of people.
It's
like,
a lot.
So not even like weird circumstances of only, 1/3 of Americans that are between the ages of 28 and 32.
Correct. The stat I saw was 1/3 of Americans.
All right. Well, I mean, it's good that they just make up stats all the time, so it makes a great topic for us to talk about.
Yeah, but I mean, so here's the crazy thing. I mean, okay, so you might have an unpaid parking ticket. That goes into collections. Maybe you moved. That happened to my mom when we were younger. We moved from Wisconsin to Michigan, and it took her like 10 years to realize that she had this unpaid parking ticket because she wasn't living in the state anymore. And in the 90s, it was harder to like track people down than it is now.
Yeah, no, I mean, even today, they just got to go away after like 10 years.
Yeah.
The system, it's not worth the systems to maintain it for how much you'd get out of it.
Right. So, like, I'm sure there's a lot of that. Like, I know here in Chicago, we see people get parking tickets every single day. So that's probably a good chunk of it. But for, like, credit card debt, it takes 6 months for your debt to actually go into collections.
Okay, so once you stop paying on it, then 6 months later, the credit card company will just go through some process that automatically sends it over to collections.
Yeah, so that one seems a lot like crazier to me if that's happening to you, because that means for 6 months you haven't made at least a minimum payment.
I also see that totally being realistic, though, too, right? Because that's the stories that I've personally heard more about.
Correct.
Less about parking tickets, more about credit card debt.
That's true. The other two that I've heard a lot are medical bills.
Medical debt is like because it's so tricky.
Yeah.
Right? It's like because there's so many different people that bill you. It's not like the hospital bills you for whatever happened. It's like the anesthesiologist bills you, and like the betting people bill you.
Right.
And like there's this other department, and like none of their departments all talk to each other. So you pay like 6 hospital bills, or the insurance does, or you think they do. And then there's like this other one floating out here, and then eventually that just goes to collections and you didn't even know it existed. Right?
Yeah, really I mean, that can happen a lot where, like, you just don't know that it's out there, or you never physically got the bill to your house, or something got screwed up with your insurance. Like, America has a super complicated healthcare system, so this stuff can fall through the cracks all the time. I'm currently in the process of paying for medical procedures, and I get bills every other day, and I'm like, did I already pay this one? Did I not pay this one? Pretty sure I paid this one. But it's so confusing to keep track of it all. So that's a huge one. And then the other one that I've heard more of is like an old phone bill, or maybe you like canceled your Verizon and switched to Google Fi or something, but then there was like that last bill that like got fell through the cracks. Yeah. So some of it's falling through the cracks, but with 1 in 3, like there's a lot that's not just like this weird thing that wasn't supposed to happened. It's probably a lot more of like legitimate people cannot afford their bills.
Yeah, because not everything. I mean, yeah, it's usually a mistake by the time it makes it to collections. But once it is there, like there's no recourse. Like the company, let's say the phone company sent the bill over, it's in collections. You don't get to argue with that at that point, right? They just like have this debt that you owe them, and that's it. You either have to pay it, or they like continue to come after you.
Well, I do think there is some negotiating with collections.
Sure, but they're just not gonna be like, oh, this was a misunderstanding. Like that's not my problem. Right. They're gonna be like, this company XYZ said you owe us this much money, and not my problem. My job is to get the money from you.
Correct.
Not to go like chase this down, because I'm sure everybody that they talk to is like, oh yeah, check's in the mail, or oh no, this is totally a mistake, right? And they're just like, whatever, guy. Like,
oh, speaking of checks in the mail, so like one time I subleased my apartment way back in the day, and this girl who rented it from me couldn't like get the first month of rent paid in time. And I was like, well, I don't want to go into collections by owing this, rental company money. So I was like, I'll pay it and then we'll prorate it. So you owe me like 28 days out of 30 or whatever. And she kept being like, oh yeah, checks in the mail. And I was like, okay, great. Because I'm like trusting, naive 22-year-old. And then at one point she was like, oh, the check was in the mail, but then I didn't have enough money in my bank account. So my banker took the check out of the mail. And I was like, when you drop something in the mailbox, like your bank is not going to be like, okay, what mailbox did you put it in? We're going to go like find it with the USPS.
Her first check she'd ever written, I guess. Like, she didn't understand how the system works. Yeah.
And long story short, I never got paid from her. Didn't send her to collections. I just wrote it off as like bad business practice and learned from my mistakes. But so anyways, today what I wanted to talk about is if 1 in 3 Americans are in collections, I kind of want to focus on the credit card aspect of it. It basically means we are buying shit that we cannot afford at an alarming pace, so much so that we're having to go 6 months without paying for it, and then people hounding us to pay for said items that we needed so badly.
Right. And I think a lot of the traps that people fall into is with like the payment programs for that stuff.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, they just get you over time, and then eventually, you have to make a choice, or a lot of people have to make a choice where they stop paying on something and they just don't pay on that last like $100 that they need to pay off on the TV because they'd rather pay for food or gas that month or whatever in that particular scenario.
Well, and where a lot of people get burned is, so you go to a furniture store, let's say, and they say, oh, did you know you can go on this payment plan and it's 0% for 12 months?
Oh,
and you're like, oh, great. And then they're like, oh, the payment for your couch will be, $50 a month. And you're like, wonderful. So you pay on this, and then you get to the end of the year and you've paid $600 on it, but you bought a $1,000 couch.
Mm-hmm.
Now you're in the 13th month and interest hits, and it's 20% interest, and you have to pay all of the past due interest because you did not pay it off in the 12-month period with 0% interest.
Right. This is
so
super
now,
common.
Instead of owing $400 left, thinking, okay, another 8 months and I'll be out of this mess, you owe another $200 or more, $250. And now that 25% interest isn't, posting every month.
Yeah, a lot of times when you see those 0%, especially furniture stores, right? A lot of times when you see the 0% financing marketing, yeah, it's 0% during that 1 year time window that you don't have to pay any interest, but that doesn't mean the interest isn't accruing that whole time.
Correct. And if you don't pay it off in the 12 months, and they set the minimum payment so that you will not pay it off in 12 months.
Right.
So what you need to do, if you go on one of those plans, it can be great because having 0% interest is good, but you want to make sure you get that thing paid off in 12 months. So you want to take whatever your purchase price is and divide it by 12, and if you can't make that monthly payment, then you can't afford what you're buying.
Right.
And that's really important to know because otherwise you're going to dig yourself into a deep hole.
If you go down that road. It's risky to even go down that road with a payment plan. I mean, if you can't afford that TV or that couch or whatever when you walk in the store with the, paying cash or check, if the check doesn't get lost in the mail, right?
If your bank doesn't come fetch it.
Then you shouldn't walk out of that store with that furniture owing somebody debt.
Oh, I agree, but I think some people try to leverage 0% interest because they're like, if I have $1,000 and I want the couch, I can leave it in the bank earning, 2%, and then,
Yeah,
whatever.
you can at
so
the
some
end
people do that
at the
strategy.
end of the year you could earn one cheeseburger, right? Like you're earning like $6 on that deal, right? And I understand the value of that cheeseburger, but there's a lot of risk involved in that process.
Yeah.
Right? You got to keep track of it now. You have to do all this management, and unless you're a person that is gaming this stuff all the time, and you got a big spreadsheet, right, that's managing all the stuff and when it all needs to be paid off and how much is owed on it, then you're probably not the person that should walk out of the store with that debt.
Correct. So another thing I wanted to talk about today really is how to realize. So I've been doing a lot of reading lately about happiness in life, and it turns out that it doesn't come from buying new shit all the time, surprisingly.
No.
People who buy stuff aren't happier. People with more things around aren't happier. It's, people who have intellectual conversations and build deep meaning relationships and all this other great stuff that's free, like fancy that. But I think a lot of people think if I can get my dream house and get it stocked with all my dream furniture, then I will be happy. And I think what's really powerful is to realize that that's not true. Now I will say making improvements to your house yourself, putting in that sweat equity, typically brings you happiness, right? So I'm not saying like live in a horrible home that's falling apart. I'm just saying don't think that like hiring somebody to do all the work for you and spending all this money and then furnishing it with brand new furniture is the key to happiness. Because here's two examples, right? So you can go and let's say you want a new dresser, right? So you could go to Art Van tomorrow, get on one of their payment plans and buy like $1,000 dresser, bring it home, but like that's probably really not going to reward you that much. Or you could browse Craigslist, find a dresser that's old but sturdy, good bones, real wood, and maybe it's not what you want it to look like, but you could bring that sucker home. You could spend some time filing it down, painting it. So that dresser from Art Van, we'll say, it costs you $500, right? Dressers are pretty expensive. Now on Craigslist, you got $50 dresser, and then you had to spend about $50 on maybe on some new hardware, some new paint. So you spent $400 less, but you put in a bunch of sweat equity. And every time you look at that piece, you're going to remember that feeling and of that accomplishment of like doing something cool and building something yourself.
So you're proud of it. But I think also you kind of glazed over an important part in the first place, which was, did I need that dresser in the first place?
Right.
Because what you bought was a storage solution. Whether you bought it brand new or you bought it used and fixed it up, you bought a storage solution. If you didn't need a storage solution, which is what happens a lot of time, people are just like, oh, I need a place to put another lamp, right? So they buy like a $500 piece of furniture to put a lamp on.
Right.
So now your lamp let's say the lamp was like $50 or $100. It was a fancy lamp for $100. So now you have a $600 lamp and table, right? And so now, and that's just one part of the room. And then you just keep doing that for different parts of the room just to fill out the space. But the leading cause of that problem was that you had a room that was too big in the first place and you just had a corner to fill.
Right.
So it's very unlikely that somebody had a pile of clothes that were laying on the floor and they needed a storage solution for that.
Right.
In our case, we actually did. Because
I was going to say, we were in the scenario of we had a dresser that was like a $50 dresser that was literally falling apart. And finally, we were like, we're not even going to move this thing again because it's not going to make it. Like, it's actually falling apart. And so we had clothes laying on the floor. And I didn't follow the advice I just gave. I was like, I don't have time right now to hunt Craigslist and find what I want. So we
got rid of our clothes.
We got rid of a bunch of clothes, but we ended up coming up with a kind of creative solution to get 2 nightstands that had storage in them. But I didn't just buy the first ones I saw. I waited and bought until I found a good deal, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the other kind of important thing is you don't need anything tomorrow. You've been living without it. So wait another week or two until you can get a better deal or get the thing you want or whatever. But you can take your time, I guess.
Right, because if you buy it tomorrow, you're at the mercy of something else. If you wait a little bit, you'll stumble across something. There's always deals out there. There's always good sites. We got our dressers on Wayfair. We got our TV stand on Wayfair too. Mm-hmm. We've had really good luck with that site. More so than Amazon or anything else. Or Overstock. But if stuff comes damaged, we just tell them, hey, the corner of this table got dropped on or something, and there's a little bend in it, and they're just okay, here's 20% off.
Right.
Yeah, sweet. That's even better because I value the 20% off more than I value the pristine design of the lamp table that's in the corner of my room, right?
Right. But Brett, you brought up a really good point in saying did you even need that in the first place? And I think people can fall into this trap a lot where it's like, oh, my neighbor got a new 4K 60-inch TV, so now I need a bigger, higher resolution TV.
Right.
And
I
I
you
think
just feel like, oh, my TV's old and everybody else's is cooler than mine, so eventually you just make up an excuse to get a new one.
right, and I think what can be a lot more powerful is like resisting that urge and just like dealing with what you have until you genuinely have a need. So we've fallen into this trap many times in the past. So there was a point in which we had 4 TVs and we looked around and we were like, what are we doing with all these TVs?
We just use them one at a time, right?
Right. We were using them one at a time, and we primarily found ourselves gravitating towards using one more than all the rest because it was bigger. And so we were like, we're just going to sell all these other ones or give them to friends or whatnot. And it has impacted our life 0%.
Yeah. We ended up getting to the point where we just watch less stuff because we intentionally don't pay for a lot of the streaming services anymore and haven't paid for cable in forever.
And what's interesting is I don't miss it. So I think we mentioned a while ago, months ago, that we got rid of Hulu, Netflix. We haven't had cable in 3-4 years.
Amazon Prime we
got rid of. So we don't really have any streaming content coming into our house with the exception of YouTube because it's free. And we don't miss it.
Yeah.
We read more.
Because whatever you're doing today, whether it's browsing Facebook and social media for whatever number of hours the average is now, right? Some horrible number per person. It's like 3 or 4 hours a day.
3 or 4 hours a day, yeah.
On social media, or YouTube or whatever streaming services. Whether you're doing that or whether you're doing something else that's, considered quote unquote a waste of time, whatever you change that behavior to, and there's 5,000 people that you could find in 2 seconds online that have done these 30-day challenges or digital detoxes or whatever, right? To just change a behavior that they're currently doing, removing that element out of their life and then filling it with something else. And the trick to success for that is that you find something else to fill it with. But then once you do, you don't miss what was happening before.
Right.
Or you don't miss 90% of what you were doing before. So the first couple weeks it'll be really hard because they're I changed my behavior and I was super addicted to watching the show on Netflix, but now I still really want to watch it, but in 2 weeks you'll be like, oh, I moved on to this other thing and not care anymore. And so we've done that one step at a time and just kept removing elements over time. And now we just don't miss any of that stuff because we've filled those gaps with other activities.
Right. And the way that it works that way for removing digital media from your life, it works the same way for removing consumer purchases from your life. So, I think a good example here is lunches. So way back in the day, I used to go out with coworkers here and there for lunch. And then over time, I started bringing my lunch more and more until pretty consistently, it's just I pack my lunch for work. I bring my lunch for work. We don't go out to dinner very often, maybe once a week for date night. And other than that, we cook dinner at home. And now that's just the norm for us. So where a lot of people, you might have more low-hanging fruit in your budget if you are doing some of these things. If you are going out to eat 4 nights a week, then great, try cutting back to 3 nights a week, then 2, and then 1, right? And then find your personal sweet spot, right?
Yeah, so it all relates back to you don't need more stuff. You don't need more media. You don't need more, whatever. You don't need to pay for a lot of this stuff that people want you to pay for. They want you to continually watch all the stuff they're producing. They want you to buy all the stuff they're producing, right? We're in a super production-heavy society, and anybody you talk to is trying to get you to buy the stuff. Right. Or use the stuff.
Except us.
Pay to use the stuff. Yeah, we're trying to get you to use only free stuff or do stuff that is free anyway.
Or really intentional purchases.
Right. Because there's a lot of the right size solutions for stuff, right? And if you have a pretty large house and you just are filling rooms full of furniture that you never use 95% of the time, or nobody uses, right? You got this big guest bed instead of a blow-up mattress, and 2 people have slept on it in 5 years, then, right, we eventually got rid of our queen-size bed.
He's speaking from experience here.
It's we have a lot of people, potentially visit, but or you think you're gonna have a lot of people visit, and then they end up not visiting or whatever. That's just the way it is. Or the thing goes underutilized, and so it's not worth like having that thing and just lugging it around. We moved it like 4 times for nothing, right?
Right.
It was like very, very low utilization. And if you move into a smaller place like we did, we actually bought some more stuff, right? And so that was the right thing to do because our situation changed and we needed different storage solutions to be more effective with how we were utilizing our space.
Well, and I would say we wanted different storage solutions and we intentionally chose those that would increase happiness. So I will say that one study recently was looking at like clutter and how clutter does impact your happiness level. Because if you are in a very messy environment all the time, your brain actually stays in a state of chaos more often. And so for us, prioritizing storage solutions, now we didn't go out and spend like thousands of dollars on storage solutions. Like I know you can get some like closet storage solutions that are super duper expensive. We got like a couple bins that were like $5 each. And then like one of those hanging things that was like, actually we just had and hadn't been using. So that was free for us. But we picked very intentional things and just to kind of get stuff organized and keep it out of sight, out of mind, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's a good point. The other thing I kind of wanted to talk about is people might be saying, oh, well, you know, it's easy for you to say this, but there's nothing you really want. So actually, I think a good example of this whole thing that I'm talking about is I would love a Tesla someday. I think a Tesla Model X would be for sure my dream car. It's perfect, it's lovely, and it's good for the environment, right? And it's beautiful. It has the wing doors. But I've come to realize, even though I could go out right now and get approved by Tesla for this car, or because I sold my car, over a year ago.
2 years almost,
and Brett and I have both had car funds forever. We could probably be pretty close to going out and buying a Tesla Model X if we wanted one. Just because we've had, like I sold the car, we've had some car fund savings, right? So if I really wanted one, we'd have a nice down payment, we'd have a very manageable monthly payment. I could buy that car tomorrow. But I've come to realize in life that Tesla Model X isn't going to bring me any more happiness than my 2007 Honda Civic. And in fact, it would probably bring me a little less happiness because then I'd have another payment every month and I wouldn't be able to save as much money and have the security that I have from knowing that, my bills are all in good shape and I can save my goal that I want to be saving every month. So...
And there's just a lot of opportunity cost with a purchase like that, right?
Correct.
And whether it's a car or whether it's a lamp table, right? Like there's an opportunity cost associated with that.
Well, and so then I was going to take that one step further and mention that really what makes me the happiest, just physically and everything, is when I actually don't have to drive at all. And when I can walk or bike to my destination. And now people might say, well, you live in Chicago, that's easy. But like and Brett is my witness, I was biking in Michigan winters 5 miles to work each way.
Against my better judgment, yeah. Yeah,
but and that still made me happier than driving my car at that time that I had with heated seats. So, I think once you really drill down, you can figure out what makes you happy. And usually, even though these things are pretty or they look nice or, every time a Model X drives by me on the road, I'm like, oh, that car is so nice. I know that it's not actually going to bring me any more happiness. So I think, and it's funny because now I've kind of gotten to the point where I do that with most purchases. Mm-hmm. And, that's how we stay frugal. We're not cheap. If there's something that genuinely will bring us happiness, like the new vacuum cleaner we got that hangs on the wall instead of taking up like 2 feet of room in our closet, that makes me so freaking happy.
Right. That was the right size solution. It takes up way less room. It's super effective. And we got it for a really good deal. So, right, that was the right size solution specifically for the space that we had. And yeah, we had really bad luck with all the other vacuums that we've had that, just take up a lot of room and were super gross over time and didn't work very well. And right? So it's just little stuff like here and there like that we can, and we didn't keep our old vacuum. That was the other thing. A lot of people get new stuff and they don't trade out.
Right.
They just keep all the old stuff too. So then you end up with a ton of clothes, or you end up with a bunch of furniture, and you just like move stuff around for the sake of moving it around or filling out other space. And then you go to downsize from your house like we did a couple of years ago, and you just like can't even give this stuff away, right?
Right.
You spent so much money filling out this house and like buying all this stuff and like getting all these yard tools or whatever, and all the stuff that's out in your garage, and then just like nobody even wants it.
Right.
It's so hard to just like get rid of stuff. It's way easier to get stuff than it is to give stuff away.
Well, and I think that's another thing that we've been like really aware of this year is like when we need something. So even the vacuum we got that we're super happy with, we ended up getting that for less than half price by buying it refurbished.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and like there's been a lot of stuff that we've gotten off Craigslist or we've gotten from consignment shops nearby, and we're just buying used, saving like 50 to 70% of the market value, and this stuff, guys, is still like brand new.
Yeah, still has the tags on this stuff, like literally brand new clothes that nobody has ever worn, and it's just like less than $10 for like these shirts or pants. Like I got like really awesome pants that fit me perfectly for like $9 that would have normally been like $70. Yeah. I was like, wow, these are nicer than I've like bought anything in like 10 years.
Yeah, it's nuts. So I guess to kind of start wrapping this episode up, I think the challenge that I want to kind of issue to our listeners is, what are the things that you're wanting after right now? And how would you feel if you can't own those items?
Right. And I guess this is a good time to ask retroactively, what did you buy on Prime Day that you probably didn't need? Or that like when it came to your house, you didn't even remember buying it?
Yeah, so I think we should share a couple things here, Brett. I think this would be fun. So one thing that I am currently lusting after is an espresso maker. Or an espresso machine. So back in college, I had like a fairly cheap, like $20, $30 espresso machine. And then, you know, college was a long time ago, so it broke. And I never replaced it because I started doing more research, and to like really pull an espresso shot, you basically have to spend a lot of money. And the one I had like kind of did it, but it didn't have quite enough pressure or whatever. And I'm not that much of an espresso snob, but I'm like, you know, that could be a fun hobby to get into. But I started looking into these machines, and I was like, to really go all in on this hobby, I'm going to have to spend way too much money. So I'm not doing it. So instead, I got a mocha pot for like $20, and it again, it's not as pressurized as like a true espresso, but it's pretty good, and it satisfies my cravings, and I'm happy with it. So instead of spending like $500 on an espresso machine, I got away with spending $20, and for me, that was a good compromise. And so I still bought something, I guess, but now I can make like pretty good lattes at home instead of having to go out. So I would say that's an area that I made a compromise with something. So can you think of something like that you did recently?
No.
Okay. Then is there an item that you bought recently that we bought historically that we had regrets about? And I think there's a lot of these. So, I mean, I've mentioned my car before. That's pretty like low-hanging fruit. But I know like in the move, you know, there was all sorts of stuff that I think one area that I can pretty easily talk about is we bought the stove of our dreams, and then we didn't stay in that house. So in hindsight, that the stove there was working. We probably should not have bought a new stove until that one had died.
Yeah. We just hated it, so.
Yeah.
Eventually. That was one of those things where we said it made us like super happy. The quality of life experience from what we upgraded to was significantly better. But we didn't need to have it. Right.
And now we've like backslid into a stove that is just as terrible as it used to be, and it feels worse because I know what it could be.
Right. It's very very frustrating to use it once you're coming back from like the most optimal stove you could possibly have. And people are like listening to us being like, what kind of lunatics are you that think like stove optimization is like a lifelong goal?
We cook at home every single day, multiple times a day.
And that was our justification, right?
Yeah,
it
was.
It's like we always cook all the time, so we should have like nicer kitchen equipment. But I mean, it was probably an unnecessary expense, and we could have gotten away with a simpler solution than buying a full super expensive stove that is like overpriced because there's no mid-grade right size solution.
Because all we wanted was an induction stovetop, which means in America you have to spend a ton of money, which what we should have done was just gotten a single induction burner that we could plug into a wall outlet and cook that way.
Right. So instead of the whatever thousands of dollars the stove was, we could have gotten like a $70 induction burner that did the job, right?
Right.
So yeah, that was probably the right size solution. But like for your espresso maker, there is like no right size solution, which is ridiculous.
Well, that's why I went with the mocha pot.
Yeah, most. I mean, I in particular, Angela does this as well most of the time. Find really good deals on a lot of stuff. We do a lot of research. We don't just figure out a product that we want and then try and buy it for the best price. We figure out exactly what is the best product for any area inside that price range, and then we try and get that item for the best product, right? So the same thing with the vacuum. Found the right answer for the vacuum, and then I got it for like a third of the price of what it should have been. Right? Same thing with our like blender, and same thing with the juicer. Actually, the blender was a gift, not that one. The juicer for sure. Found the right answer and then got it for like, I don't know, $100 to $200 off of what it should have been. But yeah, so we just can't find that solution for this silly espresso maker because there's no mid-ground.
Well, so I found the solution, and the solution is let some idiot buy it, use it once, and then I'll rebuy it from them off Craigslist. But I am on my third no response from Craigslist posters. So they're selling the machine I want at the price I want, literally like 20% of retail price, but they just go so fast because...
We don't even know if they go fast. Like, the people literally just never say anything, and they just leave the post up for like months. Yeah, you need thick skin to be on Craigslist and like buy things from that. Yeah. Let alone like the fear that people are going to get like kidnapped in the parking lot or whatever. If you can just get somebody even respond to you in like regular human communication methods, you're half the battle.
But see, now I bought some time with my $20 mocha pot, and then maybe I'll never get an espresso maker and I'll keep doing this. Or maybe someday I'll happen to find one on Craigslist. It's a good price, and I'll have the benefit of knowing that apparently these stupid things hold their value so well that if I can get one at 20% of retail price, even if I use it for 5 years, I can still sell it for at least what I paid for it, if not more.
Except for the person listening that has an espresso maker, specifically a Breville, that wants to sell it to us.
Or any Italian-made espresso maker who maybe doesn't use it and wants to gift it to their favorite podcaster. That would be nice. All right. Well, do you have any closing remarks here, Brett?
So I think, I mean, we kind of deviated in several areas here, but I think the thread and the concept remains the same of you can reduce different areas of your life. You don't need to consume more stuff just because people think or say that you should, or because your neighbors do, and you'll be fine, right? It might take like literally just a week or two of adjustment from like what you think you're spending too much on or consuming too much of today, and you'll just like develop new habits. As long as it helps to like line some of those habits up in advance, so you can stick to them. But that would be my recommendation. Yeah,
and I think something that's kind of really helped me also is journaling a little bit. So, if there's stuff you're lusting after, make a note or, on a piece of paper or digitally or whatever, and just say, I want these 3 things are my number 1 things. And then what would be really interesting is don't buy anything for a month, and then make a list of your 3 highest priority items and see if they're even the same. Because I think a lot of people are so used to Amazon now where we want something, we buy it, we get it within 2 days, that I think if you just take a month, it would be really interesting to note how your priorities change in that month. And even if you care about something that you wanted a month ago.
Yeah, I guess I do that subconsciously because I just keep a list in Google Keep of just like check boxes of like, here's stuff that we want, or gifts for other people that they have mentioned over time, right? And just in passing, and that gives us like good Christmas ideas if we're buy any Christmas presents. But for us, like I just marked down like Angela mentioned like this would be a nice thing to have, and then like when like it becomes time again for us to like go get something or like upgrade something, or it's birthday time or whatever, right? Then I go like check that list again and say, okay, do we still want this? Is this the most important thing on the list, or did something else trump it over the next like 3 or 4 months or whatever since we talked about it originally? And there's still stuff on that list that I think are good things to have or things that we could have upgraded, and it's just been on there for 2-3 years. Right. So
but it's interesting because we've survived these 2-3 years, so.
Right. And eventually whatever that was is going to get so bad that we're like pillows, I think, for example, has like been on there forever.
Yeah.
Like, we're always like, our pillows kind of suck, but we there's another one of those weird right size solutions where pillows are super expensive every time you go to the store,
or you buy like the cheap pillow, which we did buy 4 years ago, and it's awful, but we're just like, oh, we don't want to spend the money to get a better pillow.
Yeah,
so
we've been up and down this experiment of not found good solutions. So we probably just need to import them from Europe where they like know how to make things correctly. Right, but like stuff like that, like we should get different ones, but these are not like the worst pillows in the universe, and we just use them every day. So there's probably something better that we should prioritize on the list. And then someday we're just gonna like throw our pillows up in the garbage because we're just so fed up with them, and then have to get new ones. But yeah, until then, we just get by.
We sleep on racks. Well, yeah. So, anyways, hopefully this episode showed how weird we are and how we just resist buying basic human necessities like pillows for 4 years. And but we survive. And honestly, our life's not so bad. Our bed's super comfortable, so I guess that makes up for our lack of pillow comfort.
Right. It's all about balance. We get like the nicest bed we can, and then we have no pillows to go with it.
But hopefully this just showed you that it's, you'll survive if you don't go out and buy this thing tomorrow. And honestly, the right answer is to not go to the home and garden show where the guy's shilling his like $40 pillow and just buy that. Do your research. Take your time with things. Then when you make a purchase, you're going to be really happy with it for years to come. And overall, your spending levels are just going to go down naturally because you're like challenging yourself to do the right thing all the time.
Right. It just becomes kind of a behavioral trait or a skill, I guess, or a muscle, right? We're always talking about exercising.
Frugality muscles.
Mm-hmm. And, it just becomes like regular day-to-day processing in your brain. Every time you look at a calculation, every time you're going to buy something, you say, what's the opportunity cost here? Do I need this thing? Or do I want to retire like another month later because I bought this like
and now
TV?
It's so fascinating to me when I'm out with people and maybe we're walking around or shopping and they make big purchase decisions in the moment. And I'm like, wait, how does your brain function? Because like, I don't think I could ever go to the store not thinking that I was getting something and walk out with a thing that I wasn't intending to buy. It's just so foreign to me now.
Right, and that's the normal shopping culture that like I grew up with. Like all my parents and aunts and uncles and like friends' parents, like that's you went to the mall and like you browsed around and like you left with a truckload of stuff.
But how do you know that that's the right thing?
It's not.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
It was just like, oh, I just walked past this thing and it looks cool, so I got it. And that's how you end up with like 6 spiralizers in your cabinet.
So if I was an emoji, I'd be the one that has like the exploding brain.
I don't think that's an emoji.
It is. All right. Well, we've rambled on long enough. Thanks for tuning in this week. I challenge all of you to think about the things that you want and then decide to not buy them for now and wait a month and then let me know. It'd be actually cool to hear from people if you wait a month to know if you still wanted those things or not. So, all right. Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks, guys.